good. Let me click that thing.
All right, so a nice comfy seat. Get my stuff out of here. And yeah, nice little settle in here. Just anterior, posterior neutrality, fluid breath, broad shoulder column. And just concentrating on the fluidity of the breath. So no directive, no thought process around it other than how smooth can we make the exchange of that pranic energy of the breath itself. We'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds here. And so as you feel ready, we're going to drop the right ear towards the right shoulder. So just straight down, like you are trying to touch those two, but we're not lifting the shoulder. The shoulder's staying where it is. So you have some kind of core engagement as the head tilts. And then we'll come back to neutral. Neutral head alignment. Feel that rebalancing. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the cerebral equilibrium to come back. And then when you do feel ready, left ear, right, left ear directly over to the left shoulder. And lateral cervical spine, obviously, but also just kind of waking up the fluid exchange between the brain and the rest of the central nervous system. And we'll bring our head back to neutral. And take a moment here to allow that equilibrium kind of realign. Give ourselves about 20 seconds to allow that to happen. And with an exhale, allow the chin to tuck. Inhale, allow the chin to lift. Think about keeping the sternum in place. Exhale, chin tucks. Inhale, chin lifts. One more time. Exhale, chin tucks. Inhale, chin lifts. We'll return back to a neutral head position and then keep that neutrality in the neck shoulder integration as we transition to hands and knees tabletop. From that tabletop space, think about splaying those fingers out nice and wide, getting a nice top belly. Soften across the shoulder girdle. Find that neutral back positioning. And when you feel comfortable, let's curl our toes, roll our seat back, and have the opportunity to experience the first version of down dog here. Likely we have some stickiness in the shape, right? Note where we're feeling some restriction, where we feel some opportunity. And then let's come down to hands and knees and sink back into child's pose. And again, just kind of an exploratory version of child's pose where you can feel a little of the lower half of the body, anterior limitations, potentially some of that lumbar stickiness as you settle in here. And last 10 seconds to just feel into your version of child's pose. And then let's inhale, we'll come back to tabletop. From tabletop, curl the toes, lift the seat, roll back into your version of down dog. Get that full expansiveness from the finger mound, fingerprint pressure through the tailbone. And then eventually, once you've created that length, right? Think about the length on the backside of the body as the primary shape responsibility. And then once you have that, we'll walk forward and find our way into fold. And from your fold, take a nice big fluff, get the back nice and flat. And exhale all the way back into your fold space. Let the hamstrings receive the fold here. Low back receive the fold here. Top of the head releases to shift some of that responsibility towards the posterior chain. And then from that awareness on the hamstrings, let's drift up and we'll start to roll from the sacrum through the lumbar, through the thoracic, eventually through the cervical spine. And we'll stack here a nice tall sound mountain pose. From mountain, let's take an inhale, hands come together at heart center if they're not already there. So a good, strong, stable base is what we're looking for. Splay the weight out across the toe mounds. Think about that balance of weight distribution across your left and right side, and then slide your left foot to lunge. We come into lunge, we just think about creating as much space as we can around the hips without compromising the anterior or posterior neutrality. Sweep the arms, full expression of the shape. And then from that full expression, we'll drop the hands to heart center as we step back to the front of our mat. Rebalance, recenter, refine the fluidity in your breath that we started the class with. And we'll slide the right foot straight back. Create that stability. Think about as much depth as you can without cheating the neutrality. And then sweep the arms. Fully express that shape. Hands drop as we step to the front of our mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Turn the palms towards the front of the room and exhale through forward fold. Let your head go here. Let your shoulders soften here. Let your jaw soften here. Really feel into the length of the fold, how that length is changing the burden of responsibility of the stability of the shape within the musculature. And then plant your hands and walk back into down dog. So hand pressure becomes the stability as you drive the weight from the forward body, so from the hands torso, into the legs, transition that burden into the legs, get that length, create that length. And then we'll come down to hands and knees tabletop. And from tabletop, slide your left foot straight back, connect the left toe mound, feel the high to mid activate. We really want that musculature to be active. Keep the calf active as you spin the heel down so that when you land, some of that burden comes to that lateral edge, maybe even into that anterior tibialis, so wrapping around the front of the leg. But there's a good amount of pressure in the outer edge of the lower half of the leg. Then move the right hand either slightly forward or maybe slightly towards the center of the mat, and inhale and take the left hand up into a nice little grounded side plank. We really want to maintain that strength in the back leg though. So that grounded pinky toe edge is active, but all the way up the lateral edge of the calf especially. And then hand comes down, left leg comes back to join the right. And we settle into a neutral positioning here around our tabletop. Right leg slides straight back, right toe mound presses, right calf activates. Think about the calf as kind of the guide. And then with that as your guidepost, we spin down without losing the pressure. We stay on that lateral edge awareness. Hand either slides slightly forward or slightly towards neutral as we take the right hand up into the side plank, keeping the pressure on that pinky toe edge. So there's no lightening of the load, the burden of the shape on that back leg. And that really helps us elongate the lateral edge of the lower half of the leg, which is just something we don't get into very often. Is probably an understatement. Almost never. Right hand comes down, right knee returns to join the left, and then toes curl, lift your seat back towards down dog. Get that full depth, create that full space. Think about the length, and from that length, the burden of the responsibility getting elongated. And then we will shift our weight forward to plank. And as we come forward into that plank space, slowly, gently, delicately, lower yourself to your belly. And as you come down on your belly, just take a nice little breath here, a little settling here. Just take a nice little breath here. And in that belly space, let's slide our hands from where they are, maybe a little bit closer to the rib cage. So the thumbs are kind of tucked underneath you just slightly. And with the thumbs tucked underneath you, the four fingers are tilted out, maybe at like a 10-degree angle, pretty small angle, but something where you get just a little bit of outer edge rotation of the forefingers, and then squeeze the elbows both in towards the tailbone and in towards the spinal column and down towards the tailbone. And exhale and relax. Slide your hands underneath your forehead for a little crocodile pose. And just breathe here for a moment. Just a little fluid, easy breath. And so there's this random contest that has been offered. And the contest is an endurance race between two individuals. And two random people were selected. And one of them happens to be this super endurance athlete. And he's matched up against this woman who's an office worker in what is going to be a challenge, like a reality show challenge of like who can succeed at this endurance race. And everyone's pretty disappointed that this ended up being a super endurance athlete against just a regular person, because the outcome is pretty well known before the race begins. When you feel right, as you feel ready, hands slide back underneath the shoulders. We'll press up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog. And from down dog, thinking about that posterior chain length, thinking about the length of the shape itself before we walk our torso or our feet forward so that our torso can fall into the full depth of a forward fold, really getting that elongation of the back side of the body. Yeah, beautiful. Great, great, great. Awareness just to the sacrum. Let's either sweep or roll, whatever feels most appropriate for you, all the way up to mountain and bring our hands together at heart center eventually. So however you choose to get to this top space at the top of your mat, hands are at heart center. Breath is fluid, that same fluidity we started class with. We are going to both sweep the arms up and step the right foot back into lunge. So simultaneous motion, arm sweep, leg drives back. We make our way into our crescent and then roll yourself open into warrior two. Big, wide expansiveness here. And then spin the right heel back up. You're back into crescent. Hands come together. They drop to heart center as we step forward. Rebalance our weight. Feel that shift. And then we'll sweep the arms up and step the left foot back. Crescent. Once you've established the neutrality, we roll right open to two. We think about that same level of neutrality, that same openness through the hips, that width across the shoulder girdle. And then we spin the back heel up. We're in crescent. Hands drop as we step to mountain. Slide the hands behind you so that we can interlace the fingers. Thumbs press against the sacrum. Pinkies are away from you. And start to squeeze the elbows back. As the elbows is a good lead place. So elbows are squeezing, but it's very likely we're going to feel this in the shoulders. So we're searching for anterior shoulder space. I'm calling elbows out because we can get a little bit more pinch there, and that really helps to roll that lateral edge. But if squeezing the shoulders kind of up and back feels better, you're welcome to do that as well. It's a little bit less intensive for most of us than the elbow squeeze. And from this squeeze, think about pushing the tailbone back into chair. So real easy to go knees forward here because the hands are kind of like a restriction moment, but we're looking to use the chair to help us elongate that anterior shoulder capsule. And then rise back up, sweep the arms up and overhead. Whoo, exhale through fold. Settle into your fold, grab opposite elbows, rock a little side to side. Take all of that shoulder work here and let that settle in. That's a big, deep adjustment there. So really think about allowing your body a little bit of space as we just drift here, side to side. Eventually, when you feel comfortable, when you feel ready, hands will come back down to our mat. And with some awareness around the potential fatigue of the shoulders, get back to down dog. And come down to hands and knees. Flip the tops of the feet and sink to child's pose. So this endurance race is going to be broadcast on multiple TV channels, and there are going to be crews following along, and this has been a huge years-long buildup. And the only real rules or you can't use any modes of transportation. And you have to do everything yourself. So on day one of the race, this is going to be a multiple day event. Day one of the race, these two people line up, this kind of average woman and this super endurance athlete. And the starter gun goes off, and these two are supposed to start the race, but the woman doesn't do anything. She doesn't leave. In fact, she sits down, she unpacks her bag, and she checks everything and then repacks her bag. And then she gets off. And now she's 20 minutes behind. A race she's going to lose already because she's against this super endurance athlete. When you're ready, pulling forward to tabletop. From tabletop, curl the toes, lift the seat, press the weight back into the hips for down dog. Really think about the weight transfer. And then once you get the weight transfer, keeping in mind that in order to do that, you may need to bend the knees, slide the right foot straight back and behind us. So we go to three-legged dog, right leg elevating. Step your right foot to lunge. Land, splay the toes, balance the weight, sweep to crescent. Find that anterior posterior neutrality. Open to warrior two. Find lateral edge stability, find anterior posterior, find that medial line expansion. Then keep the low legs. So keep the legs, turn the torso to warrior one. Think about that good, strong midline stability. Spin the left heel up, recapturing crescent. Float the hands to the mat, step the right foot to down dog. Shift your weight forward to plank, rebalance, squeeze the glutes, squeeze the core, then lift the seat back into down dog. And once again, feel that transfer of weight. Ensure that the weight transfer happens even if the knees need to bend. And then extend your left leg straight back and behind you. Step your left foot forward. Lunge. Sweep up to crescent. Find that space, that neutrality. Once you've created that, ground the heel, open up to two. Think about that lateral stability. And then keep the legs where they are. Spin the torso to one. Good full rotation there. And then we spin the right heel to crescent. And we've completed side two. Hands come down to the mat. Step your left foot straight back to down dog. Once again, make sure that the weight transfer happens. Bend the knees if need be. And then we'll walk ourselves forward into fold. Inhale to half lift. Elongate through the top of the head. Exhale through fold. Let the head go. Really feel into the length. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. We'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, all the way up, back into this mountain space. Hands come together at heart center. Close your eyes. For just a moment, feel into the body in the same way that we started class, right? Just this little opportunity for how things are responding. And then slide your hands to your sacrum once again. Interlace the fingers, thumbs at the sacrum, pinkies away from you again, and elbows squeeze if that's accessible to you. Core stays relatively taut. Front side of the body stays relatively neutral. Back side of the body stays relatively neutral, but we get that elbow squeeze and we get that pull across the shoulders. And one more time. One time, again, how about that? Let's use the word again. We're going to sink back tailbone back into this chair. And this really does put a good amount of ask on the front of the shoulders. So remember that you can soften the shape by relaxing that elbow squeeze. And then we'll lift back up, sweep the arms up and overhead and let the hands come together, heart center. And there's some fatigue that sets in the shoulders here. We want to use the space of the shoulders, not necessarily the fatigue. But hands stay at heart center, and that's going to help us with the shoulder recovery. Slide your left foot straight back to lunge. And then keep the hands at heart center, but open up to torso towards what would be warrior two, right? So we have warrior two legs here. And then from warrior two, hands staying at heart center, we just bring the warrior one torso into our space. Then allow your hands to drop to your hips. 4 fingers kind of on the front of the hips, thumbs wrapping around the backside. And note that we still have that generous bend of the front knee. We want that. And we're going to take our torso forward. And what I want you to think about is the shoulders being level. So the hands kind of help you have that awareness, because if your weight is pressing into one hand or the other, that's going to drop one of the shoulders. So we want an equal amount of balanced energy in the hands, and then slide back into your right hamstring. And we only need to go back as far here as you need to get the activation. Shoulders staying level is the key. And then rebend the front knee and bring your torso back up towards warrior one. And now we start to feel that same hip fatigue that we had in the shoulders. So we're just really working on fatiguing the entirety of our engines tonight. Heck yeah. Torso comes forward one more time. Remember, the shoulders stay level, and then we'll slide back into that front leg. Really think about maintaining that activation there, just enough to get the musculature to go, and then just hold that space. Then we bend the knee and we come back up. We'll unwind by rolling open and blossoming into an actual warrior two. And there's a ton of room here. So steep into that room, feel the full depth potential of warrior two. Back heel spins up, we're in crescent. Hands are gonna come to the mat, and we're gonna use that energy to step forward to fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale to fold. Sweep the arms all the way up and overhead. Exhale your hands to heart center, let the eyes close. Find that balance left to right, even with a little bit of asymmetry potential. Hands stay at heart center. We'll slide the right foot back to lunge. So we have this modified crescent first. Then we roll open to 2. Arms stay at heart center. We ground the back heel as we do so. That's where the energy stays. Kind of like that grounded side plank we did. We want that lateral edge nice and strong as we roll to 1. Think about creating the hip awareness at 1, and then take your torso forward. Shoulders stay level. Once you know you have, hands slide to the hips. Sorry about that. We'll just do this later. So hand slide to the hips, and that gives us the awareness, right? That's such a big deal. That gives us the awareness. Have that awareness, and then slide back into the left hamstring to get that musculature to activate. That's all we're looking for. Not looking to straighten the leg, just looking for the activation of the musculature. And then we rebend the knee and bring the torso back up. And then with that nice neutrality, we take the torso back into the shape. Hands help us balance the shoulders. Then we slide back into that hamstring. And it is that activation, that pull on the backside of the leg that tells us we've found the depth of the shape. Knee bends, we come back up. Roll open to 2. Sink into all of that depth. Right heel spins up. We're in crescent, a big deep version of crescent. Hands come to the mat, step forward.
Fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back to fold. And as you settle into this fold, there is more room in the hamstrings. Take that. Don't fight against it. Don't let your body restrict against it. If it is, remember the knees bend. The knee bend softens the hamstrings, but it still allows you access to that length. Find the full length, then plant the hands, walk back into down dog, get all the way into the depth of that shape, push into the handprints, shift the burden of the shape to the legs. Once you feel the legs take the burden of the shape, come down to hands and knees, and we'll sink back into another version of child's pose. And this is a restorative child's pose. So this is a child's pose that we have earned, right? We have the shoulders and the hips have earned this break. Allow it to really rejuvenate those joints. Truly are the engines of the body, right? Shoulders allow us to manipulate the things around us, and the hips allow us to transverse the places around us. And we'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here just to rejuvenate those engines. So this woman starting 20 minutes behind this endurance athlete, and they are starting in this rainforest, and this rainforest is covered in sap. The canopy trees are just dripping, oozing sap off of their leaves. And the sap is covering the forest floor, and it's covering the plants on the forest floor, and it's covering the trunks of the trees, and everything you touch, the sap sticks to you. When you're right, when you're ready, pulling forward to hands and knees, tabletop. From hands and knees, tabletop, curl your toes, lift your seat, roll back into down dog. Get the burden of the responsibility of the shape into the legs. And once you get that depth, let's walk forward to fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale to fold. Let the head go. Let the posterior chain get long. Splay the toes out nice and wide. And when it's right, when you're ready, inhale. Sweep your arms all the way up and overhead. Exhale your hands to your center. With an inhale, sweep the arms up and overhead. Slide the left foot straight back and into crescent. Round your left heel, warrior two. Slide back into the right hamstring. And we're taking that right hand to the medial edge, big toe edge of the right foot for triangle. Stacking the arm structure, planting, we're energizing the downward hand, right? That could be on the leg, it could be on the shin, it could be on the thigh, but energizing that downward hand. And then really thinking about taking the top hand directly and straight above the grounded hand. Then the left oblique and the right knee are going to bend. So left oblique pulls us up, right knee bends, and we're back into this warrior two. Now we have a ton of warrior two room from our previous iterations, but we have this big side body space now too. Let's take our hands up and interlace the fingers overhead. And then think about locking in the core. And we're going to keep the torso in line with this right thigh as we reach and extend towards the front of the room. And then draw right back up with that left oblique. Spin the back heel up. We're back to crescent. Float the hands to the mat. Left foot steps forward to fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale to fold. Sweep the arms up. Exhale the hands to heart center. Stabilize here. When you feel ready for this, the right foot slides back, both arms sweep up, one solid space. We roll open to warrior two, slide back into the left hamstring. Left hand comes to the medial edge for triangle. The grounded hand, the left hand energizes, and that right hand finds its sack. Right oblique, left knee bends, right oblique pulls us back to two, all of that depth of two. Arms sweep up and overhead. Fingers interlace, index fingers point towards the ceiling. The torso stays in line with the left thigh as you reach and extend into that space. Think about that pinky toe edge of your right foot anchoring you. Right oblique draws us back to two. Right heel spins up to crescent. Hands float to the mat, step forward. Inhale to half lift. Exhale to fold. Plant the hands, walk back to down dog. Get into that space. Shift your weight forward to plank. Glutes, core, quads stabilize you as you lower to the belly. Hands stay planted underneath the shoulders. Quads flex, tops of the feet anchor down. Think about keeping your forehead planted on the mat or resting against the mat and trying to elevate the center of your sternum, like the smallest amount possible, right? So forehead's planted, but we're using the backside of the body to try to just elevate the sternum an extra little speck. Quads are flexed, core stays flexed, the breath stays fluid. And relax. Slide your hands underneath your forehead. And we'll give ourselves about 45 seconds here. So this race that has started out in this sap-covered rainforest eventually gives way to a very small, brief transition of plains, and then it goes into this dune desert. And this woman is behind in a way that you would expect if a regular human was competing against an endurance athlete. And she gets to the edge of the rainforest, and before she goes out to this savanna transition, she stops. She pulls this like razor blade out of her bag, and she starts scraping off all of the sap from her clothing. When you're ready, we will slide the hands back underneath the shoulders, press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, just extend the legs straight out in front of us for a little staff. From staff, take yourself forward into a fold. This is a fold of your choice, a fold of the depth of your choice. Anything that you want to adjust here to make this the most beneficial for you, adjust. Last 20 seconds here. And when you feel right, as you feel ready, we walk the spine back to vertical, and then we are transitioning onto our spine. And as we come onto our back, legs can be however feels comfortable, arms can be however feels comfortable. Well, I really want you to take a little note of how much of the thoracic slash shoulder girdle we freed up on the back side of the body. Even when we were shoulder focused, we were working on that anterior restriction. When we get onto our back here, all of that anterior space now allows for this big opening. And I just want you to feel across that big opening of the shoulder girdle and how that allows for the upper back to just be greeted by your mat. We'll give ourselves just another 15 seconds here. 15 seconds of just pure appreciation for what we've done so far. And then as you're right, when you're ready, we're going to bring our knees into a bent space if they're not already there, and then allow the bottoms of the feet to come together and the knees to fall out nice and wide. Settling into this supine butterfly shape and feeling how the hips and the lower half of the thoracic spine are responding to the work we've done. So oftentimes this supine butterfly shape is going to push a lot of extension into the lumbar, so there'll be a big arch. We are hoping to have at least softened that arch in the lumbar spine here tonight. The last 20 seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, knees return back to neutral, kneecaps towards the ceiling. Feet settle on the ground. And once you have that foot settlement, the weight distribution balances, right? We find that equilibrium in the middle of the body, then we'll allow the knees to start to rock side to side. And now we start to take in a little more awareness of how the upper and lower half of the body are integrating and how the upper and lower half of the spine are integrating. And if there's any residual stickiness in those transitions, feel free to adjust the rotation in a way that it will be most beneficial for alleviating any of that stickiness. So you can stick at a particular point in time within the rotation. You can encourage additional rotation by pushing the top knee forward, or you can limit the rotation by only going partway into the lateral movement. But just explore what those rotations can do for you for about 30 more seconds here. Dynamic movement for about 30 more seconds. And so she has this like kind of a putty blade, razor blade-esque thing that she's just scraping her clothing with.
And you could see if you're watching this at a close enough space that the sap has started to become a little bit of a resin on the outside, and she's able to just truly scrape that sap off of her clothing. And while she's doing this, they come up and they interview her, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm trying to remove the sap that I've got on me. It's this sticky residue, and I don't want to carry that into the interface here through this little prairie area, and I certainly don't want to carry sap into the desert, the dunes. The sand will just stick to me." When you're ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral, and then allow the knees to fall over towards the right side. Both knees fall towards the right. If you don't feel like going into the full rotation and you don't have a prop, then what you can do is you can keep the right knee vertical and just allow the left knee to fall in towards it. And that gives you some of that rotational capacity without forcing the entirety of the rotation. So if you want to adjust the rotation, there is that always available to you. And so the interviewer says, you're racing a professional athlete and you're racing them in their sport. Do you really think it makes a lot of sense to stop here and scrape off sap from your clothing? And she just looks back at him and she's like, "Yes, I do." And then when she's done, she gets up. Now she's about 40 minutes extra behind. She goes through this little savanna area and into these dune deserts. Last 30 seconds here on this first side. And meanwhile, up ahead, her competitor took no precautions. And he has made his way deep into the dune desert. He's relatively close to finishing the race, quite honestly. When you're ready, knees come back to neutral. And then we'll exhale over to the second side, the left side. And as we settle here, same thing. You can use that left leg as the brace. The right knee can fall into that, and that can prevent from a full rotation of a twist, but you still get that hip rotation. Or you can go all the way, or you can use props if you have them available. But if you don't have props available, there is a way to really easily limit that rotation. So I just want to make sure that's called out. And he's deep into the dune desert, but he is also like a glue trap. And the layer of sand and sap and the grasses from the savanna area is inches thick, which means each step he's taking is this huge laborious effort. Last 30 seconds here on this side. And the laborious effort is starting to come to an end because he can see the finish line in front of him. When you're ready, knees return back to neutral. And your eyes close, your awareness drifts within you. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana? And if there is, offer that to yourself. And even with the finish line, maybe 100 yards away, he's starting to panic because he might not be able to finish. And he might not be able to finish because the cocoon of residue that he's built up around him from the sap and the sand and the grasses is restricting his movement to where it's almost impossible to move. He's starting to just like waddle. And the buildup continues. Each step, there's more buildup. When you're right, when you're ready, when you feel like you've had everything you could possibly need tonight, let's bring our body into a position where we can appreciate some stillness. And from that stillness, settle into our Shavasana. So laboriously waddling towards the finish line becomes impossible about 50 feet away from finishing. And this ultra endurance athlete is stuck, frozen in time, surrounded by this residue, mummifying him, making him into a statue. About 18 hours later, this woman comes across this motionless man 50 feet from the finish line. And her supporters encourage her on. And eventually she crosses. When you're right, when you're ready, start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes, through your hands, through your feet, to your wrists and your ankles, elbows and knees, shoulders and hips, neck and head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, we'll allow the movement in our body to transition us from the shape we are in back into a seat. And in the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes closed. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that if you aren't careful, the residue from your past experiences can dramatically limit or even halt your ability to progress forward? And see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here with me. Have a beautiful week. We'll do this again next Monday. And if you want to recharge, that's coming up on Sunday. I love the heck out of you. Mwah. Thank you guys so much. Love the heck out of you.